All right.
Awesome. So welcome everybody to our final lunch and learn of 2021. We're going to talk about riding in the cold and dark today. Wanted to let you guys know that we are going to be recording this so we could share the tips and tricks that we will have today with others outside of this group. So that is amazing. Wanted to remind everybody the Y at the Athenaeum and Ursay Family Y downtown are open, as are all the other central Ys. BGI at the City Market is still open, so if you're downtown and need some bike work done, you can go there. It's operating Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. Closed on Sundays and Mondays, but the other BGI locations are operating at normal hours. And so I mentioned that this is our last lunch and learn of this year, so you guys can enjoy a few months off, and we'll be back with some great topics for 2022. But I wanted to mention that if you do have any topics that you want to have discussed or have any interest in becoming a presenter for a topic for next year, throw something in the chat and we'll take that into consideration. Yeah, we are a bunch of volunteers of different organizations coming together to do this. So any help that we could get is great. Any suggestions that we could get is great. So we welcome your feedback on that. So now I want to introduce our presenters for today. So we have Andy Gremos of Bike Indianapolis and Roy Sparks of the Fall Creek Flyers. Well, and Andy's part of the Fall Creek Flyers too, but I wanted to give them two separate designations. So guys, I'll let you guys take it away and I will shut up.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This is really a great opportunity for Roy and I to talk about some of our experiences and tips for the riding that we do together over the winter. Roy, myself, and my wife Krista, who's also on this call, like to spend our winters bike commuting from the northeast side down to downtown Indianapolis. And here's a nice shot that Roy's showing us of Roy and I taken by Krista on one of those commutes. And I would put this out there, if any of you all are interested in joining us this winter, Fall Creek Flyers, please do let us know and we'd be happy to connect with you and have you join our group. So
hey,
with
Andy,
that,
hey Andy,
yeah.
Where does the Fall Creek Flyers start off from?
Good question, Sarah. We now start off from multiple places, but the actual first starting point is the Boy Scout lot, the Boy Scout headquarters lot located at the intersection of Shadeland and Fall Creek. They allow us parking lots and have our cars there during the day while we ride downtown. So that would be the first starting point. Roy is now joining us further down the line at basically along the Fall Creek Trail at Emerson. So if there are others that would like to join us along that line rather than starting at the same spot at the parking lot, that's also an option. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Roy.
Super. Yeah. So welcome everyone. As Andy said, we're part of a pretty dedicated commuter group. I personally ride about over the last 16 years since I started riding, I average about 3,100 miles a year. I ride every month of the year commuting to work. Depending on the months in the winter, I do not really slow down when daylight savings time ends. I continue to ride because I'm a driven person. So I have ridden in every month of the year, several hundred miles in each month of the year. And so I have a lot of experience, as well as Andy, about riding in the cold and the dark. So when I was putting this PowerPoint together, I thought something catchy just struck me, the 4 L's of riding in the cold and the dark. So we're going to cover those today. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask during the presentation. So 4 L's of riding in the cold and dark. We're going to cover layers, lights, logistics, and the last and most important showstopper, learning to love it. So layers, head to toe, what to wear for winter biking. Now, I have gone out and looked at numerous websites regarding winter biking and what to wear. And the site that I think it provides a lot of valuable information is this site by 45 North. So for the folks on the line today, all you got to do is Google 45 North, what to wear, and it will, this web link will be one of the results. So I'm going to go to this site real quick and just highlight a few things about what to wear and layering. So I'm going to blow that up a little bit so folks can see it. So this site does a really good job. And one of the things that I like most about this site is if you haven't biked outside in certain temperature ranges, they give you each one of these is a link with their recommendation by a person that works for 45 North, what they prefer to wear, what you should consider in biking in each of these temperature ranges. So I think I'll kind of skim down through this page, hit some highlights, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to click on this link about 25 to 45, because I think in Indiana, from my experience in the winter, that's the sweet spot. Once we get to, November, December, especially in the morning hours of 6 a.m. or so, we're going to be in this 25 to 45 degree range through most of the winter. So heading down here, one of the things that if you're a dedicated cyclist that likes to ride in the summer, one of the things that you're going to, especially if you're riding long rides like centuries or whatnot, you're going to come across and eventually figure out hydration strategies and how much you sweat, what your sweat rate is, how much you need to consume. And that's critical when you're selecting your clothing and what you're going to wear, because if you have a high sweat rate like me, the whole layering and what you wear becomes very instrumental, because the reality of this on this sentence here, right, that if you put too many clothes on and you overheat and it causes you to sweat, okay, that water is going to be held against your skin and it's going to suck heat, from a thermodynamic perspective from your body, because your body will try to heat up that moisture held against your skin and you're going to get cold. And I will tell you that when it comes to layering, once that occurs, because that's something I struggle with, to be honest with you, once that occurs, you pretty much have to go what I call into Dutch oven mode. And that's pretty much the outer shell gets zipped up, all the vents have to get closed, the cuffs get strapped shut, and you just hold your vapor in, you're under that outer layer, which is not ideal. But the reality of it is if you don't get this layering right and have a high sweat rate, last measure is Dutch oven, as I call it. So one of the things you want to do is not overdress, right? So I was often, told this, I've heard this, people have given me this advice that if you start the ride and if you don't have a slight chill, or that you're slightly cold, right, when you start, then you have overdressed. And once you get 2 miles or so down the road, you're going to start sweating, and now you're going to have all this moisture that's going to suck the heat out of your body. Okay. So one of the things that you have to figure out for yourself is moisture wicking fabric as a base layer. The more form fitting it is, the more effective it will be. And so one of the things that I use typically is I'll use in the winter, I'll go to some kind of merino wool base layer, which I find to be, it provides a layer of warmth, it provides moisture wicking, and it also retains, I think once it does get soaked, it does retain a thermal property value. There's some information on this page that talks about that. So merino wool is always a good choice for a base layer. When it comes to your head, we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's important to have head coverage under your helmet. I don't change helmets in the winter from my summer. I use my summer helmet, and I'll just put head covering on. And typically, once we get down in the, below 45, it's typically some kind of head covering that is thermal, um, thinsulate type of material with some kind of wind blocking gore fabric on the top of it is typically what I use. But I will tell you, my head coverings will vary based on temperature. If it's in the up mid 40s, I may end up with a merino wool beanie. I get down in below 30, down into the 20s, mid 20s, which is quite common in January and February. That's when I may go with a thintsulated head covering with a wind resistant, like gore wind stopper fabric on the outside of it. So you just kind of got to figure that out for yourself. But it's not a one size fits all for me. I do change head coverings depending on the temperature range. They give you recommendations for various caps and neck protection. We talked a little bit about moisture wicking, which I've already addressed, but here you go. This is the sentence I thought was interesting. Yeah, so it absorbs 30% of its weight in water before it starts to feel damp and moist. So that's kind of my preference in go-to base layers. I know they can be expensive, but at the end of the day, they're worth it. And to be honest, they do have a odor fighting property too. So that's a side benefit. The next thing you got to consider, as I mentioned before, is this outer shell, and watch these can be quite expensive, and they run the gambit of Gore-Tex to Windstopper to Event material, which Showers Pass likes to use. That's a brand that I have a couple jackets that are Showers Pass jackets, and so you just want to make sure that you find something that will block the wind. For me, I want something that has vents in it that zip, that I can zip down and zip open, whether they're chest fits or pit vents, or even vents that are off the back. Because like I said, the whole sweat and getting that out and not collecting on your base layer is important. So I find that something that has venting in addition to vapor penetration from the inside to the outside is highly beneficial. So that's it for layering. They do talk about hand protection here. What I do is I just have a really nice set of winter gloves. They're actually made by 45 North, and they're rock solid gloves. I've never had cold hands down to like 17 degrees. But they do have things called pogies, which is more of a Northern Canadian term. These are what pogies look like. They attach to your bar. Sometimes Bar Mitts is also a brand that is made. So you can use these if you want to leave them on your bar. The reason I don't do this is I like to be able to move my hands around on the bar when I'm riding, and so I don't really care to use these. Toes and feet. It probably goes without saying that you got to keep your feet and your fingers are probably the two items that are going to get cold first. And if you get those wrong, you're going to be uncomfortable and it's not going to be a fun experience. So, we want wool socks. Smart wool is great. Make sure you have a shoe that has some kind of wind blocking properties, whether you want to put a shoe cover over your summer shoe, that often works fine. But you definitely want to wind block. And the other thing I'll do is I'll put toe covers over my shoe with a chemical heat warmer once we get down in the low 20s, and then put a shoe cover over the top of that to keep my toes warm, because my commute's only a little over an hour, and that works great. Anybody got any questions about clothing? That's kind of the highlights. Like I said, you can come here for yourself and take a look at what they have to say here. I won't regurgitate it for you, but I think down here at the bottom, they give the temperatures. I'll click on this real quick. So this is just an example of what the temperature range guidance they give you are. And you can see they've just updated this in February. So they give you various guidance. They actually give you pictorial for our people that like to learn by pictures on what this person typically will wear, but they come down through here and they give you specific guidance on, you know, what they like to wear, why they like to wear it, the layers they prefer. And so I highly recommend that you give some guy, read this guidance. It's very helpful. Anybody got any questions on that before I move on to the next L? Okay. The other thing I would say too is is to keep some kind of log, right? Especially if you haven't done a lot of winter riding. And these recommendations are great, but you're going to have to tweak them based on your sweat rate. So if you want, I always tell people, I say, you need to consider, okay, what works at 45 degrees, what works at 30 degrees, what works at 25 degrees, what works at below 20, and just kind of keep a log so next winter you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Because I think we probably all of us winter riders have come across, it's like, man, what was I wearing last year when it was 35 degrees outside? And you kind of got to, regenerate that every year. So keeping a log is helpful.
Hey, Roy, there's a question in the chat about your helmet and your winter hat. So do you wear the winter hat underneath your helmet? Yeah,
so there's a couple ways to handle that. My preference is to wear the hat under the helmet. And I typically start out with a merino wool beanie, and when it's in the 40s to mid 30s, and then I have a thicker, more thin, it's a wool product also made by 45 North. It's called a stovepipe hat that has a gore layer on the outside of it, wind stopper type of layer that I'll wear once it gets down about freezing. There are some people in our crew that they will buy like a gore shell that goes over the outside of their helmet to provide that wind blocking property that you really need once you get down below freezing. But I don't personally use those. I just go all under the helmet.
And then I had a question. So you said that you have a pair of gloves that you love that have you've never gotten chilled with. You said that you got those from 45 Degree North. Yeah,
they're called. I think they're called this. They're in Minnesota, so they have this tendency to name their products after like Norris, Scandinavian names. I think they're called the Stumberfist or something like that. It's a full 5-finger glove. And I have never had any issues with that. I've also had a pair of Pearl Izumi. Oh gosh, what was, I don't think they may not make them anymore. Inferno maybe I think is what they were called, that were really good. So, but the 45 North is, I've never got I have a handful of their products, and I've always liked their products, and they've never disappointed me.
Awesome, thanks.
So heading on to the next L, lights. So here, just a few.
Hold on. There's another question in there.
All right, I don't have the chat up. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So Krista asks, I have trouble keeping my leg muscles warm below 20. Add a wind layer. Any suggestions?
Yeah. So I kind of glossed over the legs, didn't I? So what I do when it's down in the 20s. I have a pair of Castelli winter knickers that I wear with long wool socks. And when if it's in the mid 20s and the wind chill is significant, I will put an additional, I got like a set of rain pants from Showers Past that I'll put over the top to kind of get wind protection. So pretty much down to the mid 20s, I just use a thermal knicker with thick winter specific merino wool socks that go up to my knees, that are made by Ralph, I think.
Cool, thanks. And thanks for saying knickers a few times. That makes me smile.
Yeah, you know, Krista likes to call them capris, so we have a running joke about when we're going to wear our capris. But yeah, knickers. I prefer knickers. You know, you can do the full length, but the reason I don't do that is because just the ease of getting them on and off. I don't want to have to diddle around with doing a zippered at my ankle, and sometimes they're not zipped, and it's just a pain. So I prefer the knickers with wool socks. Just a preference of mine. Headlights. So headlights are critically important. Obviously, you got to see where you're going, and there are a couple of things that I always recommend to people. There are handlebar mounted lights and there are helmet mounted lights, and you always should take one more light than you need. In case you have an issue with a light, you have an extra, because you do not want to get out in the middle halfway to work and you're going through a wooded section and you forgot to recharge your light and now you don't have any lights. So I always carry two lights with me, and I use handlebar mounted lights, but I have what I'll do is I got a strap for my helmet with an adapter so I could take it off my handlebar and put it on my helmet if I have to. And the reason that's critical is if you get a flat and it's pitch black outside, you need a helmet mounted light in order to have light while you're using your hands to replace your tube. So just take that into consideration, that it's highly beneficial to have some kind of option where you can mount a light to your helmet when you have to fix a flat tire. Personally, I prefer the rechargeable lights. Generally on my commutes, I recharge them sometime. I ride probably 3 to 4 days a week. And so, you know, I'll end up recharging them once or twice a week. And I wouldn't waste any money on anything less than 500 lumens. Second thing is, so that's the C part of it. So be seen as flashing red tail lights. And again, I always apply the N+1 strategy with that. I always have an extra tail light. Fortunately, since they repaved the Fall Creek Trail last year, we have not been riding as much on the street. We used to ride on the Fall Creek Parkway proper, pretty much from the Boy Scout all the way down through the bridge there at Benford, just because the trail was horrendous. But now that they repaved it, we're not riding hardly any on the city streets until we get downtown. But again, I always have two tail lights for the same reason. You need to be seen by motorists. And speaking of being seen, I also have a personal kind of philosophy about reflective elements that I wear when I'm riding. And I specifically make sure that I have at least a 2-to-1 ratio of reflective elements to how many lights I have. And that includes headlights and taillights. So for example, if I'm riding and I have three lights, it's dark enough, I have 2 headlights and I have a tail light, I'm going to make sure, you know, that I have at least 6 reflective elements on my person or my bike. And those are typically in your clothing. If you have a shell, typically it's integrated into the clothing. Your shell, your pants have reflective elements on it. You can have reflective elements on your shoe covers. The other thing that I do is I put reflective elements on my bike itself. You can do that with stickers. And so I use a company called, I think you pronounce that Fix. It's ridewithfix.com. And they have various sticker packages in different colors that you can get to put on your bike, whether you put it on a fender or whether you're putting it on. I ride flat pedals in the winter, so I will put stickers on the back and front side of my flat pedals. I'll also put stickers on if I'm not wearing a shoe cover, I'll put stickers on the back of my shoe. And you can even put them on the rim of so you can have side visibility. They even make wheel kit packages, so you can put them on the rim of your wheels. And they come again in probably 5 or 6 different colors. Any questions about lights and reflective components? All right.
Yeah, no, hold on.
All right, you got it.
Give me some time here, buddy.
All right.
Krista had a comment in here that wheel lights also help. So those are the ones I think that could go in and out of your different spokes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she has one of those. It's quite fancy. Yeah, you can make different designs and different colors, and yeah, so that's always an option too. I personally don't have those, but we do have a couple of people that ride with us that do have
And
those.
then Celeste asks, what do you think of the monkey lights or wheel lights? Would those suit for front or rear lights? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, I believe that is, I don't have one, but I believe that is one of the manufacturers of those style of wheel lights. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Krista said that she has monkey lights, so yep, that would be the same thing.
Yeah. So we're done. Anybody have any other questions on lights before, or reflective elements? I will tell you that one of the things, especially if you're riding on the trails like the Monon, because there's a lot of cross streets, whether it's crossing 38th Street at our fancy new crossing, which has no signage, and I'll let that go someday. But the Monon has several cross streets, and so you have to. What I've noted is if you don't have reflective elements, cars coming up, as we're heading southbound, and they're coming in from particularly the westbound lane, so that's the first lane you're going to cross. If you don't have reflective elements either on your wheel or on your head tube, or your down tube, or on a front fender on the side, you don't get their attention as well because they can't really see the flash. They may not see your headlight. So I always caution people to, consider putting some kind of wheel light or a reflective element on the rim of your wheel so they can see you coming down the trailway. Okay. So logistics. Here I'm just going to talk a little bit about, tires. Now, I would say that you don't need to go buy a new bike to ride in the winter. But I will tell you, if you can put wider tires on your bike, it depends really what you're comfortable with. In the fall, the leaves come down, they're wet. And so you got leaves scattered on the trail. It can become a little slippery. Sometimes you get a lot of rain in the fall. So a wider tire would be preferable. So depending on the rim you have, you may want to bump it up a few millimeters if you can. The second option is if you do have a tubeless rim, you might want to consider running tubeless. Personally, I like running tubeless in the winter because I don't want to get a flat and have to, take my Stumberfist gloves off and, get my hands all frozen while I'm trying to change a tube out. So personally, I run tubeless in the winter. The other thing you do, if you can get a wider tire with a casing with a little bigger volume, like for example, 28 millimeter tire or even a 32, you can run those at lower pressures. And so on my 28s, I run them in the winter, I run them about 90 pounds. So you get a little bit better contact patch. So you have a little better traction.
So so for my normal, I have a hybrid bike or whatever.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to lower the pressure on that? I think it says that it's like 65 PSI is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, you can run them lower. You can just experiment with that. My bikes are all, so on the tubeless, the other upside about tubeless is, I have a 2-inch wide tire. It's a 29er rim. And I run that in the winter. I'll run that about 30 PSI. So that's one of the upsides of running tubeless is you can go much lower on your tire pressure. Now, if you're not running tubeless and have a standard Sport Comfort tire that it gives you a suggested PSI of 60 or 65, you can run those lower. You just got to figure out I don't have that combination, so I can't give you a number on what would be a good number to start with, but you can definitely dump out, 5 to 10 pounds probably and still be all right on that kind of tire.
Awesome. Thanks, Roy.
The other thing is fenders. Again, you don't have to have fenders, but if you have a bike that has fender mounts, it's always great to have one, especially in the fall, because it keeps the water off of you. You can ride after it's rained overnight or during a light rain or light snow, and it just keeps the water from getting up on your legs and your feet and your clothing. And it keeps your bike much cleaner too, by the way. The third item here is organized. So one of the things that really keeps me dedicated in riding is laying everything out and organizing everything the night before. So I have a full system of, I got a 2-story house, and so all the bedrooms are upstairs. So I bring all my gear down and hang it on the bar stool with the kitchen counter, and I lay all the stuff I'm going to carry on my person out on the kitchen counter. And I go out in the garage and I check tire pressures the night before. If you're carrying a bag or a pannier or pannier, depending on where you're from, getting everything packed up and ready to go the night before really takes the pressure off. The next morning, you don't feel as rushed to get ready. And the fact that I have my gear laid out when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, yeah, I don't have an excuse. My gear's ready to go. I just got to go put it on. Right. So, and also that feeds into number 4. The more organized you are the night before, the less time it does take you to get ready. But compared to a summer kit, for me, I need to allow an extra 10 minutes of prep time because I'm wearing more layers and I'm, have to navigate all that to get out the door. So it takes me 10 extra minutes versus a summer ride. Item 5, make sure you do carry extra batteries. So like I said, on headlights and whatnot, I prefer rechargeable. But on my taillights, I do use battery AA's on my batteries. I got super flashes that I use. And so make sure you carry spare batteries with you. But if you're carrying an N+1 light, that becomes less critical because you have an extra light ready to go. Anybody have any questions about logistics, organization, getting ready for the ride?
I have a question. So you just said, you would have a spare tail light because you have you're carrying extra. Before when you were talking, I was thinking that you had all of the lights going at the same time. You're saying carry those extra in case one goes out?
You can do both. So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. It depends how many people I'm riding with. If I ride, I always have 2 taillights. Now, whether I use the second one depends on if I'm riding solo or if I'm riding with a group. If I'm riding with a group, I only use 1 taillight during the ride, and the other is in my bag as a standby. If I'm riding solo, in order to be better be seen, I mount one on the back rack of my bike, and then I will clip one on a rear pocket, preferably closer to my side, so I get some side visibility on my left side. So as as that westbound traffic is flowing, they're going to see that light as I cross across street. Good question.
And then nothing else in the chat right now.
All right. So learn to love it. You got to go out and find your Andy and your Krista. You got to go find that person that wants to ride with you and is dedicated to it and wants to be consistent. Because, I almost put peer pressure instead of accountability. But at the end of the day, if you have somebody else that is going to be riding the next morning and they're counting, and they're going to meet you at a certain location at a certain time, you're much more likely to increase your dedication level, right? Because if you roll out of bed at 5:30 in the morning, that's when I get up, and some mornings you're like, oh man, I'm tired, but I know I'm meeting somebody, right? And they're going to be there, and I don't want, and that helps motivate me the days I don't feel like riding. Also, it goes without saying, the more people you have on your ride, you do get some conversation, the ride goes quicker. And so you don't notice the cold as much because you're talking and you're not focusing on, hey, it's cold. You're focusing on, the topic of the ride, so to speak. And when you ride with others, one of the key things is that if you do get a flat tire, you've got somebody that has an extra light and can hold your bike for you while you got to fix that flat. And you're not trying to manage all that on your own on the side of a trail. The second thing that I personally appreciate, especially in the mornings, is, the scenery is different. You see different animals that are nocturnal and out and about. We see foxes, we see deer, You name it. If it's an urban animal, we probably have seen it. I mean, I've seen red foxes sitting in the middle of the Fall Creek Trail when I'm riding to work. So you get to see a different perspective of the city, right? It's quieter. The city just kind of waking up. And, personally, I really like that aspect of it. You kind of ride to work as the city wakes up, and you're not sitting in the car listening to the radio. You're actually engaged with what's going on in the city as you ride through it to work. So I appreciate that. And the other thing I wanted to mention here is if you have an iPhone and upgrade to iOS 15, they have a new, what they call focus mode that you can set for your phone. And so I created a cycling focus on my iPhone. And what that does, it gets you a custom screen and you can predetermine what notifications you get and whatnot. So I have a cycling focus that I turn on that gives me, it gives me Strava, it gives me Garmin, it gives me radar. It gives me all the things that in a detailed forecast, it gives me all those apps that I use just specifically what I want to see when I get up and ride to work. So you can cut the noise and distractions out by using that new feature in iOS 15. And the other thing is you just got to have fun. That's it. So anybody got any follow-up questions?
No, great information. Thank you.
All right.
Great job there, Roy.
Somehow I'm not sure.
Some motley crew, by the way.
It is. I got to get this off. There we go. I got to stop sharing. All right.
Anybody else out there in the forum have any questions or comments, or I guess have anybody else out there ridden in the cold and dark and have other tips for people?
I've got a question about what do you do with snow and ice? Somebody else just asked as well.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I'm sure Andy and Krista may chip in on this too, but so yeah, that can become a problem, and that's where it becomes more critical on your wheel and tire choice. So I do run, and when I run my tubeless setup when it gets cold and vis-a-vis more likely to snow, I do run, like I said, I run tubeless so I get lower tire pressure and more traction. And I do run a tire that has a tread pattern on it. Now that said, when it does snow, what I found is if it's very light and it hasn't been ridden on, it's typically not an issue because you're kind of the first one to go across. Where you get issues is if you get like an inch snow and you get a bunch of people walking on, you get down to the Monon and people ride and walk on it, they'll compress it during the day and it'll become more of ice, packed ice instead of snow. And that's when you got to be careful. You can still navigate it, but you just got to get to a comfort level with it because what can end up happening is you get some snow over some packed ice, especially if you have a follow-up snow the next morning and you won't see the packed ice section and it can get a little slippery. But I'll ride with light snow. Now, if it snows like 3-4 inches, I typically don't ride just because that's not enjoyable. You spend a lot more energy getting to work, and I just don't want to deal with that. I know there are, these fat tire bikes out there, and you can get tires with metal studs in them and do all that. I don't own a fat tire bike. If I did, I might ride more, and when it gets about like 2, 3, 4 inches of snow. But personally, I kind of cut it off and wait for the snow to melt or get cleared. We had one winter where somebody went out with a bobcat and cleared the Fall Creek Trail when we had like a 3-inch snow. I don't know if they're going to plan on doing that at a regular basis when it snows, or if that was like a one-time anomaly. I don't know if anybody has an opinion about what they've heard about snow clearing on the trails, but
the only trails that get cleared are the Monon and the Cultural Trail.
Yeah, it was a weird situation. Like I said, they went out with a Bobcat and cleared the Fall Creek Trail all the way up past where what we ride. So it went all the way down to 38th past 38th Street. But that was
We were-
just one time they did that.
We were thankful.
Yeah, we were thankful. It let us get back on the trail sooner. Otherwise we'd have had to wait another week or so for the temperatures to warm up and clear it off. The problem you get into is, it's probably worth mentioning, if you do get a snow that's 2-3 inches and you're like, okay, I'm going to wait till it warms up. What ends up happening, especially on the Fall Creek Trail, is you'll get sections that are exposed to sunlight during the day and it'll completely melt off. But then you'll get into the sections, like south of when you go over that single lane bridge and you're in the woods, it'll be packed ice and snow because the sun doesn't hit it. So you'll get sections of snow and ice and sections where it's completely clear. So just be prepared for that. It's not hard to navigate. You just kind of got to slow down and see how slippery it is before you go plowing through there at 15 mile an hour.
If it's icy, I won't ride.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is I do have studded snow tires for winter riding, which I use more for ice than snow, to be quite honest. I'm paranoid of black ice in the winter time, because you can't see it, particularly in the dark. So there are times of the year when I would tend to ride with studded snow tires.
There's
Yeah, it's
also a question about riding in heavy rain and if your gear changes significantly.
For me, riding in heavy rain, I use the same shell that I use in the winter. It's a Showers Pass. I also, like I said, I have rain pants and that I use and shoe covers that I use. So no, I reuse that gear in heavy rains, the same gear I use in the winter. For wind protection, I use as rainwear.
Well,
It's the same for me.
So Krista was crying because she wasn't in any of the Fall Creek Flyer shots. So I pulled up a shot for her.
Yeah, I thought about putting a shot of Krista in there, but she's, then everybody would just be all distracted by, her great beauty and nobody pay attention to me.
Oh, with all this good information, how can we not pay attention to you, Roy?
There you go. She takes a lot of the pictures. That's some of the reason why she's not in any of them, because she's the one taking the picture.
That's right.
Expedition photographer.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts about riding?
I would add one thing that we started as the Fall Creek Flyers, we kind of started doing last winter. When you do run across that stretch of the winter, when you do get a heavy snow and you don't want to ride outside and commute to work, we actually started using Zwift for our group, our folk commute in the mornings. So we would organize a Zwift meetup for the people that wanted to ride in the mornings, and basically we'd meet on Zwift at the same time and do a ride on Zwift for 45 minutes or whatever in the morning, so that way we could keep getting some miles, virtual miles in during the winter, and that seemed to work out pretty good for us, and kept people more engaged in the winter when the weather really turned on you. The people that, as you can imagine, there are some people in our group that once daylight savings time ends, they're like, hey, peace out, I'll see you next spring. So if you're adverse to riding when it gets really cold, Zwift and virtual riding is always an option, especially if you want to do group riding.
Well, and you guys have like a text group or something like that also, right? So when you guys are planning to ride in the morning,
yeah, correct. Yep, we use GroupMe is the app we use. I forget who owns that. I don't know if that's a Microsoft product, maybe. Yeah, So the whole text string on iMessage and whatnot got to be quite cumbersome. So we decided one of our members proposed we use GroupMe as our messaging app for our Fall Creek Flyer group. So it's pretty nice. I like it.
Okay. Any final words from anybody out there? I'll do it going once, going twice.
Find crazy people to ride with.
All we need is you, Krista.
Yeah, well, you know.
Yeah, and Krista usually brings the tunes. That's the other thing about riding with Krista is, you know, you do get
And the
blue-
treats.
Yeah,
And
you get the
brownies.
Oh yeah, and she'll feed you occasionally. And the thing I like about Krista is if you like mention to her like 3 times, like oh man, I could use a snickerdoodle cookie. I could use a snickerdoodle cookie. She'll actually make them and bring them.
It's that subliminal messaging.
Yeah. So
Third time's a charm. Yeah.
So what I hear is we need to all join the Fall Creek Flyers.
Yes.
hey, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
You know?
Love to have folks ride with us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Roy, for sharing all the information, getting everything pulled together, and all of your great tips. I appreciate it. And like Sarah during the cold months, this is peace out for the next 2 months. So we're not going to have meetings in November, December. So we'll likely kick it back up in January after New Year's resolutions start.
Cool.
You can come ride with us, Sarah.
Yeah.
I like that laugh.
Thanks. Thanks for leading us through these lunch and learns this year. It's been great.
Absolutely.
I
Well, you guys
just want to
take
say
care.
thank you. Really good information today. Thank you for sharing.
Awesome. Thanks.
See y'all on the trail.
Sounds like a wrap. Everybody chill.
Later, Gator.
All righty.
Don't freeze.
Take care all.
Bye.